Would you guess at all that it's very humid today? I think it's supposed to rain later, but for now it's just all of this. I got all of this. Hi everyone, I am back with my reading wrap-up for the second quarter of 2021, so from April to the end of June. And I'm gonna say this more for myself than anybody that might be watching, but I will try my absolute hardest to spend as little time as possible, so to keep my time on each respective book to a minimum. And if I feel taxed or worn out, I will simply stop and I will come back to it later. So the good news is my list for this quarter is shorter for some reason. I feel like I may have forgotten a couple of titles, but that's okay, it's not a huge deal. And also, I will not be spending extended amounts of time on certain very specific books. So I have every confidence that this video will not be quite so long this time. Let's go ahead and get started. First book I read was Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Alicia Elliott. This is a collection of essays that has a lot of elements of memoir. Elliott offers a lot of commentary on Indigenous issues. She talks about growing up on a reservation, mental illness, abuse, food insecurity, intergenerational trauma. I read it in one sitting. Every essay was spectacular and strong recommend. Next, oh, here we go again. The Smart But Scattered Guide to Success: How to Use Your Brain's Executive Skills to Keep Up, Stay Calm, and Get Organized at Work and at Home by Peg Dawson. This is a book. I can't spend too much time on it. It does exactly what it says it does. It is written for an audience that predominantly has ADHD or, executive dysfunction, but not being limited to that particular audience. I've been reading a lot of books about ADHD, and this one is probably more specific in its breakdown of executive skills than any other book I think that I've read. It gives 12 separate but interconnected executive skills. And there is an assessment in the book that you can take, which should at least give you a general idea of your particular strengths and weaknesses. And then in the subsequent chapters, it isolates each executive skill and then tells you more about it neurologically, and then also offers like coping strategies for each. It's very good. The language and some of the examples they use are kind of gendered, a bit sexist, but other than that, it's fairly comprehensive and I would recommend it. Meaty by Samantha Irby. Not a whole lot to say about this one either. A collection of essays, 4 stars. It is just as great, hilarious as anything else I've ever read by Samantha Irby. This is her first collection of essays, and it contains, I think, a little more of her, I want to say origin story, that's not right, but a little more of her personal history when she's younger. And as a result, it's a little more chaotic, which I have no problem with. Also, the essays themselves aren't quite as interrelated as some of the ones in her later collections, which again is also not a problem. They're just really good essays. A Flash of Words, edited by Brian Poem. This is a collection of flash fiction, which normally I love and I try to seek out whenever I can. Flash fiction is very broadly defined as fiction that is at least one word and is generally less than 1,000 to 1,200 words. This is an anthology, so it has a variety of authors and a variety of genres. I don't know if it's because there are different genres and each story is so short, but it seemed very all over the place. Not necessarily that the stories were poor, but that it was just poorly edited, which is disappointing because I usually like it so much, and I wish I had more to say about it. I wish I had better things to say about it, but unfortunately, I don't. How to Be Both by Ali Smith. I don't know what else I expected. Like, I wanted to love it. I didn't hate it, but I didn't have particularly high expectations for the novel in the first place, which is divided into two parts with 2 points of view from very different characters. And the cool thing is that in different editions, one of the points of view is arranged first, and then in the second half you read a different part, and then in other editions the second part is arranged first, so you read that first and then you read the other point of view. So depending on which edition you read, it will potentially influence how you perceive the novel, how you interpret it, and that is very neat. But unfortunately, though, the writing is smart. I think it may be too cerebral for me, but like, Ali Smith's writing just doesn't give me anything to grab onto, and I can't, for whatever reason, stay engaged. So I think this might be it for me, Ali Smith wise. Socialist Realism by Tricia Lowe. This is not defined as a memoir, though that's arguable. It is described as a book-length essay in which Lowe offers criticism about like very large, like very broad concepts like home and identity, and also like herself and her family and her life and how she interprets those larger constructs within her own life and identity. It's a little hard to explain. It is both simple and complex. It is conceptually a pretty heavy read, but I did enjoy it quite a bit. I gave it 4 stars. If you have the option to listen to this one on audiobook, I think it'll probably go easier for you, because I started reading the text and then switched over to the audiobook version, and it went a little easier. I was able to absorb more that way, so that's what I would recommend. The North's Meat Murder by Frances Lockridge. This was a book club pick because, of course, there is a cat who shows up multiple times throughout the course of the mystery and is, I would say, vital to solving the crime. I have had little, if any, experience with mystery as a genre before reading this book, so my frame of reference is kind of poor, but it was fine. It was a little hard to follow, and that was mostly because all of the characters were the same. In like dialogue and characterization, I had difficulty telling the characters apart. It takes place in and was written in the 1930s, so I think that might have something to do with it. There was one non-white character in the entirety of the novel, a Japanese migrant who works in the employ of one of the suspects, I guess, and the treatment of this character in both depiction and on-page treatment is horribly racist. I did give it 3 stars because the cat is very good. Disfigured, on Fairy Tales, Disability, and Making Space by Amanda Leduc. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this one because I don't know, honestly, like how much I can add. It is a criticism cum meditation on fairy tales and how they shape our perception of beauty and ability. I've seen a ridiculous number of reviews for this book, all favorable for very good reason. It is excellent. Murder on Astor Place by Victoria Thompson. After reading The North's Meat Murder, I wanted to read a couple more mysteries to kind of like shape my opinion on mysteries in general. As the name implies, it is a historical murder mystery, and it takes place in Gilded Age, New York. I really, really liked it. The pace was great. The mystery was good. I guessed the ending, but it was like a page and a half before it was actually revealed, which personally is what I like. Because if I have a supposition, I don't want to wait too long before I discover whether or not I'm right. So I was reading it, and then like right before the end, I'm like, oh, and then that was actually what happened. I rated it, I think like 3.5 stars, but rated down on Goodreads. I have a couple other titles by Victoria Thompson on my list, in my saved, so I may revisit that, but we will see. Writing Fiction: A Guide to Narrative Craft by Janet Burroway. This is the most comprehensive, best book about creative writing that I have ever read. It is assigned as a textbook in many creative writing courses, and that is completely understandable. If you have any interest in creative writing, or are a writer and you have not yet already read it, you definitely need to read it. The Beauty by Alia Whiteley. This one made the rounds on BookTube too. I want to say maybe last year. I don't know what else I can say about it, and I wouldn't know where to start, because the consensus is, I think we can all agree, that it's real weird. It takes place in a quasi-dystopian, I don't want to say world, but like environment in which all of the women have died off, but on or near the grave sites of these women, a mushroom-like, fungus-like, organic being kind of grows and gains sentience, and a portion of the remaining male population considers replacing women with these sentient mush women. I can't say any more than that, I think, because of spoilers. The narrator is, I think ultimately we would consider that an unreliable narrator, or an extremely naive narrator, which I absolutely love. It was super surreal, but I really liked it. This is one of those books where it would have made a perfectly fine short story or a longer book, but like the length that it is leaves you with a lot of question. Now that may have been the intent, but I don't know. I personally think that either longer or the addition of one or more points of view would have improved it overall, but that's just me. I still gave it 3 stars. Daughters of the Grail by Elizabeth Chadwick. I, as I mentioned before, am a big fan of historical fiction, though when they are super duper long, I tend to lose a fair amount in recollection. It takes place in 13th century France, following Bridget, who has mystical powers of healing and prophecy, and claims, though not publicly, descent from Mary Magdalene, a line which she feels, well, doesn't feel, but has, like an imperative to continue the bloodline. So she has a daughter with a nobleman, and the book basically covers a period of time during, I think, the Second Crusade, in which they connect and reconnect, and there are like territorial battles locally. I think that is mostly what I remember. It was good, but it was very, very long. I Hold a Wolf by the Ears by Laura Vanderberg. This is another one that I really regret not making notes on as I was reading it, or writing down my thoughts immediately upon having finished, because I loved it so much. Throughout the book, in each story, everything is normal, but not. Everything is just a little off. Not as in bad, but as in unusual, like you have to look at everything twice. There's an overall tone Is tone the word I want to use? Maybe. Of like grief or disappointment or yearning or regret that's just kind of like steeped in all of the stories. It's hard to explain. You'll just have to read it. Please read it. It's great. The Secret Talker, a novel by Gaylene Yan. I was promised disturbing twists. I did not get that. The Secret Talker is a novel about Hong Mei, who is married to a slightly older college professor, and she is not as happy in her marriage as she once was. And seemingly out of nowhere, she starts receiving emails from a strange man. End of plot. That's it. There are parts of the novel in her correspondence in which she tries to reconcile events from her past, and that gives the story a little more complexity. But for the most part, it's just Hong Mei sending and receiving emails and making a half-hearted attempt with the help of one of her friends to determine who this person is. And that's it. Maybe, again, some of the suspense and the twists were lost in translation. I can't say that for sure. That just might be my brain. But I was, on the whole, it was honestly pretty disappointing, and I gave it 2 stars. I think I have like maybe 2 or 3 2-star reviews this quarter, and this is, unfortunately, this is one of them. Ring Shout by J. P. Clark. This is another one that has been talked about pretty extensively on BookTube, which is great. More people need to recommend it to more people, and more people need to read it. This has everything a person is looking for in a horror / dark fantasy / speculative novel. It's a cosmic horror revisionist history based on specific historical touchstones, specifically in this novel, the film Birth of a Nation and the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. It's just spectacular. If I had one complaint, if you can call it that, would be that it is a little bit too short. But that is also a criticism that I've heard elsewhere. When you finish the book, the ending is satisfying. You just kind of want more of it. But again, that's like, if I have a criticism, that would be it. The Crusades by Zoe Oldenburg. This is a reread of an audiobook, and if ever I say that it is a reread of an audiobook, assume that I'm reading it to relax. I think I remember saying at some point in an earlier video that listening to like historical nonfiction audiobooks specifically is a very comfort zone, security blanket sort of experience for me, nostalgic, like based on a habit that I developed during my undergrad. So I don't know, I just suppose I needed it at the time. I really like the narrator for this audiobook. I cannot remember her name, but I find it very comforting. She narrates this book and also a book called A Distant Mirror, The Calamitous 14th Century, which is quite possibly my favorite historical nonfiction book of all time. But this, as the name implies, this book discusses the Crusades. And if you don't know, there were 6 crusades, 6-ish crusades, and the Children's Crusade, which was like auxiliary to the First Crusade. She really doesn't go into too much detail other than Crusades 1, 2, and 3. She mentions the Children's Crusade like toward the end, and says in the book specifically that she didn't want to really discuss the Fourth Crusade at all because it was less of a crusade and more of an opportunity to loot Constantinople, which, fair. But that's it. It was good. The Merry Spinster, Tales of Everyday Horror, by Daniel Mallory Ortberg Lavery. This is a collection of short stories in which the author revises certain fairy tales, some beyond the point of recognition, to interrogate expectations placed on women, both physically and emotionally. Some are superbly deconstructed, and even like chilling in the way that the reader can at times like barely like orient themselves within the context of the story. And writing like that, when it hits, it hits. And when it misses... Last year, I read Something That Will Shock and Discredit You, and I gave it 5 stars. So I admit freely that it is possible that my expectations for this book were a tiny bit too high. But I gave it 3 stars, and I did enjoy it overall. The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. This was a book club choice for May because there is a cat in it. But this cat is about 4 feet tall and walks on its hind legs and is actually a demon. Spoiler. I'm trying to be judicious time-wise, so I'm not going to really go into like the plot. And I think you'll be equally confused if I did or if I didn't. So don't even worry about it. It's a lot. There's a plot line about a novel which coincides with like flashbacks to Pontius Pilate and his interrogation of Christ and his subsequent crucifixion. There's a guy who is committed because he's convinced that he's had multiple interactions with the devil, and later on in the second half of the book there's like a Walpurgisnacht ball with various demons and dead people. It's a lot. Also a translated work, and as already established, works in translation kind of like I can't follow them as well. I can't follow them as closely. So it definitely deserves a reread. Caroline, who is my friend and did my book club and has her own channel, Short Skirts and Sarcasm, which I will link in the description box, has a reading vlog for this book. So if you want to know more, please check that out and do not rely on me to accurately describe the contents of this book. Florence and Giles by John Harding. Inspired by Turn of the Screw, it's about 2 children, Florence and Giles, who obtain a new caregiver after their old one drowns in a lake. But there is something not quite right about the new governess, and Florence is determined to find out what that is, and the stakes are raised. It becomes even more important when Florence discovers that her young brother Giles might be in danger as a result of it. It is an extremely well-told modern Gothic novel. In my opinion, and I'm not an authority, but in my opinion, to say that something is a Gothic novel, there has to be a very particular setting and degree of suspense in order to call it a Gothic novel. Does that sound snobbish to say? I don't know. What is Gothic? But this book has all of those elements, 100% strong recommend. Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay. This is a collection of essays by Roxane Gay, named for a 2-part essay in the collection and not announcing a general theme for the collection as I had assumed, but that's on me. The essays vary in length and quality throughout. As with most collections of essays, I gave it 3 stars. I didn't think there was anything particularly groundbreaking, but that is probably also on me. The collection was published in 2014, and I think had I read it at that time, I probably would have appreciated it a little bit more, but I enjoyed it. The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was another book that was wildly popular in the last year or so on BookTube, and I definitely get why, though I think that my own enjoyment might be just a little below average. The story was good. The plot twist / reveal at the end was also very good. The main issues that I have with the book, well, one is characterization, which is not strong with any character with the exception of Evelyn herself. And that's because she is telling her story. She's spending the entirety of the book telling her story at length. Another is that I don't particularly care for stories about celebrity or the idolization of celebrity. It's just not, personally, it is just not for me. And that is unfortunate because, you know, if my recollection is correct, I think that all of the books that Taylor Jenkins Reid has published so far have been about figures of celebrity or people who were once celebrities. So, I mean, unless something about that changes, it's probably the last time I'm going to read a Taylor Jenkins Reid book. Not that I didn't enjoy it, but as I said, it just doesn't really seem to be for me. Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. This book I think I found like completely randomly on Scribd. I think it was like recommended. I don't remember. In any case, I'm very, very glad. It took me a minute to get into it. I thought after the first 2 to 3 chapters, I was gonna have to DNF, but it definitely came together and it was like an honest to goodness pleasure to read. It is about 6 people who are at an apartment viewing. They're held hostage by a bank robber after the robbery does not go according to plan. Really though, it's kind of like a character study of these 6 different people and the relationships that they develop between one another. And it is just very charming and heartwarming. It was a quick one too. It was very easy to read, and I definitely recommend it to someone who wants to read something very quick and uncomplicated and just very nice and heartwarming. 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson. This is another mystery that I had picked up simply because I hadn't read enough yet. And this I think was a good choice. It is a mystery thriller, I guess. And even though it wasn't particularly fast-paced, it was very good. I enjoyed it. It was about the owner of a specialty bookstore who is contacted by the FBI because they think, potentially, a series of murders might be related to a blog post that the store owner had written years prior called 8 Perfect Murders. The FBI is trying to get some information, possibly assistance from the bookstore owner. It had a couple of different twists, which was very nice. I was not able to guess the ending. And I don't know, is that how you judge mystery? Is that how you gauge like the quality of a mystery, or how you enjoy a mystery? Like whether or not it's something that you can guess, or just whether or not like it's interesting and it like keeps you as a reader engaged. Please let me know. I literally have no idea. I want to say also that there is a bonus cat. I should have recommended this for book club, and if I had known, I definitely would have. The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. This is another one that was moderately popular on BookTube for a brief minute. I think that it was a like a book of the month offering, and that might have been why. I was very excited about this book because, as I mentioned before, the Great Depression / Dust Bowl is a special interest of mine. It is about, it's a singular point of view. It's about a woman named Elsa, and the earlier part of her life is largely out of her control. When the story kind of kicks off, she is living with her husband and in-laws in Texas during the Dust Bowl. And she decides that she wants to take her children and move to California. So there is a lot about the migrant experience in California during the Great Depression. And Parts of it seemed to be very thoroughly researched, and surprisingly, some parts seemed to be not very thorough at all. I admit, again, that my expectations for this book were high, or rather, I really wanted it to be good, not only because of my interest in the Great Depression, but also because of other reviews of Kristen Hanna's books. Like The Nightingale was very highly reviewed, and so yeah, I think I just expected a little more than I got out of this book. Godshot by Chelsea Beaker. Biker? Sorry. Holy dang, did I like this book. I didn't know what to expect. I did not actively choose this book. I mean, I did, but this is another one that I had found almost completely randomly on a Scribd, purely incidentally, because it just so happened that all of the books that I had saved on Scribd were not audiobooks, and I was looking for something very specifically to listen to. Did not disappoint. All I knew about this book was that it was kind of a cult book, and it is that, but there's a lot more to it. The setting, which is in a town that has no water, the idiosyncrasies of the characters, the gradual relegation of the girls and women within this community as objects and vessels. It was a lot. Really, there was a lot to it, but definitely good, definitely worth reading. Cat Person and Other Stories by Kristen Rupenian. Another one that absolutely slaps. By the way, this was before all of the Cat Person discourse on Twitter kind of blew up. I had read, for the first time, I had read Cat Person in the New Yorker possibly 6 months ago-ish. And that was the reason that I had read the book. So I was very, very pleased that something happened on Twitter that I didn't have to look up, because I knew what the discussion was about. So that was nice. That was an added bonus. But I will tell you now, whether or not you know anything about the short story Cat Person. Cat Person is the tamest story in this collection. Just weird and disgusting, but in an absolutely perfect way. Just gross, just people engaging in their absolute worst impulses. So good. So good. My jaw had literally dropped and was open at least half the time I was reading. Excellent. No notes. 5 stars. Sanatorium by Abby Palmer. The way this book is described as a memoir after Palmer returns from a specialized spa with hot springs and purchases a small inflatable tub for her apartment is true, but there's a lot more to it. Palmer is a multimedia artist that specializes in collage, and I would personally describe this book as a form of collage. It is kind of mixed media in its presentation. There are like diary entries from her stay at the spa, poetry, illustration, all of this combined. And it's centered around identity and ability and living with chronic pain. It was beautifully written, and I swear I am not doing it justice. It is very, very good, and I really think that you should read it. The Forgotten Garden by Kate Morton. The author says that this book was inspired by The Secret Garden, and I can definitely see that. This book is split into 3 different timelines, 3 different perspectives. One in the very early 20th century, I want to say like 1940 1904, 1905, and then another in the 70s, and then in 2005. And Cassandra, who is the 2005 main character, is trying to like solve a bit of a family mystery after she is bequeathed an English cottage after her grandmother dies, when, as far as Cassandra knew, her grandmother had lived in Australia her entire life. It was good, but if I'm really honest, there was a lot. Not in that it was particularly heavy or hard-hitting or anything like that. I mean that there was a lot. And the reader was presented with way too much information. It was long, and I think there were too many points of view. Parts of it were epistolary as well. It was just, in my opinion, it was trying to do too much. But it was not a bad story, and the premise was good. Tall Tales Secret Book Club by C.C. James. This one was a book club pick for reasons that should be obvious. Despite my lack of experience with mystery, or like cozy mystery, which is what I think this is, although I'm not 100% clear on the term or what it means, like in the context, like within the genre, what is a cozy mystery as opposed to like any other mystery? Not sure. But even with my limited experience, I can say fairly confidently that this was not good. The tone was weird. It was off. When something devastating happened or when somebody died, the excitement and curiosity of the characters like outstripped any sense of surprise or fear or caution. They would just casually mention the fact that someone had died and then immediately take a tea break and then talk about something else. It was kind of off-putting. Also, at the end, when the mystery was on the verge of being solved and when all of the clues were supposed to come together, they just kind of like spilled forth, and then they all immediately led into one another and connected for the characters. Because I tell you what, it made absolutely no sense to me. There were maps and there were like literary references that were supposed to be relevant but not actually explained in the body of the text. But I mean, the cat, who is a ginger boy named Hank, was very, very good. And after all, isn't that why I read it in the first place? Hood Feminism, Notes from the Women That a Movement Forgot by Mickey Kendall. A lot of folks have read this one too, and it's another one that more people need to recommend to more people. I don't know if this was intentional, but I really liked the way the essays in the beginning were more a direct criticism of the blind spots of white feminism regarding women of color, like employability, food insecurity, mental health, gun violence. And as the essays progress, they seem to demand more from the white women reading, more in terms of accountability and direct action. I don't know, like I said, if that was done on purpose or if that's just my reading of it. Maybe if I were to reread, I would see those demands throughout, but I will undoubtedly read it again, and I'll be able to make that determination then. Rules for Visiting by Jessica Francis Kane. Rules for Visiting is about a woman named May Attaway, who is a gardener / yard maintenance worker for a local university, and she like really enjoys plants, particularly trees, and she goes viral on social media because of one of the trees that she has planted on the university grounds. She's rewarded with a month's paid time off. If only, right? So she had been wondering what kind of friend she is. And so to better understand what friendship is and to determine what sort of friend she had been, she uses this month off, for approximately 1 week each, visit 4 of her friends. Now, the way I read this is May is coded autistic. And I think that's why I enjoyed it as much as I did. The way she earnestly enjoys her life, for the most part, exactly the way that it is. In her home life, she shares a house with her elderly father, with her job, with her love of trees, with her earnest desire to understand what friendship is, to learn more about it and herself, and correct anything that she might potentially be doing wrong. I don't know, I really loved it. I cried a little bit. It was really great. I think it was a great book to end on for the month. And that's it. We're done. I don't know why I'm surprised, but I am. It didn't take nearly as long as it did last time. It didn't wear me down like it did last time. And I'm gonna call that a W. So, that's it. If you can remember what you read in the second quarter of the year, please feel free to share with me. Or you can tell me what you're reading now. That's okay. But now that I've done the first half of the year, going forward, I should be able to do monthly wrap-ups. That'll take a nice solid 10 to 15 minutes tops. And believe me, I'm as excited for it as you are. Probably more, because there's like 3 of you watching. You know what? I'm leaving it in. I'm gonna own that. Again, if you made it all the way to the end, I appreciate you. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe if you would be so kind. And thanks again. I will see you in my next video. Bye.